Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody to Newcastle Fast FM to Wednesday, the 16th of Ramadan. We're past the midway point. Can you believe it? SubhanAllah. And here we are on E-Reminders Show, midweek, mid-Ramadan. And I am very privileged to have this conversation with our guests this evening. And just before I introduce them, I just want to say that in my line of work, I meet some very interesting people who are doing some fantastic work. And as part of that, I get great conversations and I get great insight into kind of what's going on. Bit of jack of all trades, but that nonetheless, I get a wealth of knowledge and experience that gets shared with me. Wa alaikum salam, Stillness. Thank you for joining us this evening. Wa alaikum salam, Malahat. Thank you for joining us. And so this evening, we have the Northern Genetics Service as part of the Newcastle Hospital NHS Trust Foundation. And we are going to talk about that this evening. And we've got 4 guests with us. So we've got a full screen full of amazing knowledge and amazing experiences that are going to get shared with you this evening. So it gives me great pleasure to say welcome to Lorraine, Oonagh, Rachel and Amy. Thank you very much for joining us on this evening.
Hello.
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 That's great. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. And I, when I was talking to you specifically about this, Dr. Lorraine, I found it fascinating about the type that work that you do. Now, just for the benefit of our viewers, our listeners, and actually a little bit for myself as well, when we talk about the genetics service, what does that mean?
Well, the genetics service specifically that we'd like to talk about tonight, Wajid, is the cancer genetics service. So the genetics service is much wider than that, but it's very difficult to explain all of that in one show. So we just thought we'd focus on one aspect of our service, which is the cancer genetics service. And in that, we see people usually who have a family history of cancer. We know that cancer is a common illness, and 1 in 2 of us will unfortunately get cancer at some point in our lives. And the majority of those people just get cancer by chance, just for many reasons, as background population risks. But some people get cancer because there's an inherited genetic susceptibility in their family. And our job is to try and help those families to access more screening so that we can either catch cancer early, so that's treatable and curable, or in some cases we can prevent cancer from occurring through those screening processes.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, because genetics covers everything within the genes, basically, what makes us human, right? Yeah. But there's ways of seeing and recognizing certain characteristics within those genes, is that right? Wow, okay. So that's basically the gist of our discussion for this evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you're going to get a lot out of it. And what I would also ask you to do is
looks like we've lost him. I'm guessing he'll be put back on in a second, but I guess it's just, talking about that for the next hour, I suppose, and what we do and how we do it and how you can find us.
Oh, I'm not sure what to do. Oh, hello.
Sorry there. Yay. So just for our viewers and our listeners, if you have any questions or specific comments about that, do get involved, drop them in the comments, and we'll try and do what we can in the sense of answering them. Now, as far as this type of work, though, around genetics, is this something that's quite new, something that's quite sort of a new part of study in science?
I guess it's not new as such. There's lots of new developments all the time, but I mean, we've been doing sort of cancer family history genetics for probably 30 years, in a sense, but it's grown massively in those 30 years. So I've been in this department 30 years, and we started doing it and we probably saw maybe 40 families a year we picked up, and mainly because it was a research thing. Now we probably do 3,000 families a year, so it's changed a lot in those 30 years. So it's new as such, but not completely new. So it's developing all the time.
Yes, when you've gone from 40 families to 2,000 families, is that just because you've widened the scope of the research, or is that because cancer is becoming more prevalent?
I don't think it's because it's more prevalent. I think people are more aware. So I think that's we never really knew much about cancer and how it works in genetics years ago, but apart from a few families that people thought, but just our knowledge over the years has increased, and people are much more aware of they worry maybe more about it, they talk about it more, so they ask the questions more. Yeah, and then that just helps in being able to diagnose it better, and to treat it better.
And we've identified more genes, haven't we? That we know that can cause cancer if there's genetic changes in those genes. There's more of those genes around, so there's more genetic testing available for people, which obviously brings it more to the forefront, and more people can come and request testing.
And I think there's more we can do as well for people who've got a family history. That there's more understanding of what works and what helps and prevents things or detects things earlier. So the more you identify things that can protect, the more you've got to offer people. So the more your scope broadens then as well. So it's changing, even in things that we probably don't even in our service think about, but there's other cancers that we can target, people are targeting more, not just us, but in the wider kind of medical world, people are targeting all sorts of things because new screening programs come along, and then new understanding of who's at risk comes along. So there's a lot more out there that we don't do, but is being done by other people as well, I think.
I think it's really it doesn't always get recognized how much the science keeps changing in a lot of ways. Or further discovery actually changes the way we think about specifically cancer and genetics. With yourself, we've got Amy and Rachel here, who are trainee genetic counsellors, and so you've been doing some work around the evaluation work like that. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so because we're trainees, part of our training, we do get to do some of that evaluation work, which is great. And both of us have focused our evaluation work on part of the cancer genetics service as well. Mine was just an evaluation of a questionnaire sent out to patients, and it was just basically getting their views on how the service was for them. And there's been some really interesting findings. It's still kind of in the early stages, but things like we collect family history information when someone's referred in using a form we call a family history questionnaire. And that can be a lot of information. It's a booklet to fill in, and it's all important information, but it can be quite difficult for families to get. You don't always know all that information, that kind of a thing. And so it's just for us important to communicate to people that it's really important for them to, even if they don't know a lot, still fill in the booklet what they know, send it back to us. And also just to feel free to contact us at any point with any questions, because I think sometimes people don't realise that we're just there, we're on the end of the phone. If you've got any concerns, any worries, just pick that up, and it's how we communicate that really to people, that we're there and we're flexible and we'll do what we can. It's been really interesting for me doing that work.
For me, so I'm also a trainee here at the Northern Genetics Service, and as part of my training, I'm specifically looking at how COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our patients. So like many services, we have had to adapt and change slightly our clinical services. So traditionally we would typically see a patient in a face-to-face setting, so in person in a consultation. But because of the benefits of being able to contact our patients from home, we're now using things like telephone calls and video calls to speak to them. So the evaluation that I'm currently doing is just trying to get feedback from the people that we see and from the people that we speak to. Are the telephone calls and video calls working as well as our traditional service? And is it something that we could possibly look to in the future to see is this something that we could implement beyond the COVID-19 pandemic? Would our patients that we see like that choice of how they would like a consultation, and are we meeting the needs of the population?
Now, in your titles, I appreciate that. Walaikum Salam, thank you for joining us, and Walaikum Salam Song for joining us this evening. So in your title, it says counsellor as well, because you're dealing with extremely sensitive and situation. So, there's one thing doing an evaluation and getting that information, but does your job then, how does the counselling complete that process, and how does that assist you when you're collecting that information from people?
Well, we have we're not therapeutic counsellors in the sense of a psychotherapist counsellor, but our counselling is about we use counselling skills. We use those psychotherapy counselling skills, as in sort of listening skills. We're sensitive to people's understandings of genetic disease. We also are really sensitive to the family dynamics and family relationships. And genetic information isn't just information that affects one person; it can affect whole families. And often it's, or sometimes it can be very different, people's approaches in families to wanting that information. So if you have one person who really wants that information, but that information would reveal something about somebody else in the family who doesn't want that information, that's where our kind of counselling skills come to the fore. And our sort of counselling remit really is to try and help somebody to make the best decision for them at that moment in time, in their context, in their family context, in their social context, with the information that we've got. So that's not just looking at the medical facts, that's looking at everything about that person in a very holistic way. And I guess that's where our counselling skills come in. So we're not, we don't give counselling therapy skills, but we do have that enhanced sort of communication skills that come through counselling.
Yeah. The reason why I bring that up is because you don't normally get the mix of science with the counselling side of things, if that makes sense. And I think it's a very unique way that I see happening. But again, like you said, it's that delicate situation that you've got somebody who's going through that, but then also sharing family information that might lead to a discovery of something that you don't, it's challenging enough to handle it for yourself, never mind have to be worried about somebody else. And I think you can see how that counselling mindset would be helpful when you're gathering this information and working with individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we use a lot. I guess we've Lorraine and I have been here for a long time, so we've got a lot of. You gather a lot of information and experiences from people, and that gets utilised in how you support families. And also we've got to be able to understand and explain things, complex information to people at the right level for them as well. So that's another thing that we have to do. Is it's not just kind of blind them with science. Some people are quite happy to be, they like the science, but a lot of people we've got to make sure that we get that information across in a way that they can understand, and not be too scientific, but be at least give them the right information so that they can kind of understand it themselves and comprehend it. So that's kind of what we do a lot of, really. It's just pitching things at the right level for people. Mm-hmm. And that could take a lot of time with some people. It might take less time with others, but that's kind of, we just got to have the patience and the time and the listening and be able to make sure people can understand it.
And I think just coming back to you, Amy and Rachel as well, in that does it help that you don't have to get it done in a certain time scale? Have you found that helps? Have you found situations are different depending on what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Like each person's so individual, each situation's so individual, and it's great that we have kind of that freedom to be able to work with each individual and each situation and take as much or as little time as is needed. And it is about tailoring that approach and just making sure you're meeting the needs of the person in front of you or the family in front of you at each time. But I think it's great that as a profession, we can sort of be flexible about how we use those skills to make sure hopefully we're doing the best for everyone we see.
I, completely echo what everybody else has said as well. I do think, it's really important to be able to adapt in the situation that you're in, and just really listening to that individual, what their concerns are, what their questions are, and as Oonagh said, sort of getting that information in a way that they understand as well, and just being able to support not only the patient, but the family as they incorporate that new sort of genetic information into their lives.
I think that, and Amy and Rachel are probably, I would say, probably understand the science, despite the fact they're trainees. They understand the science a lot better than we do as well, because a lot of the new science they've had the ability to learn, and we kind of they teach us as well. I think that's the thing, because we're kind of not too long in the tooth, but we're just, it's things have moved on so much that actually our understanding is just not as good as theirs, I would say. So we do learn from each other, I would say. I think that's quite useful for us.
Mm-hmm. I think our backgrounds are different, aren't they? Because genetic counselling is an evolving profession, and so Amy and Rachel are coming in through the scientific training programme, which is a fairly new programme. It's only been out of 2 or 3 years, and that really very much marries the scientific training with the patient-facing training and the communication skills and counselling aspects. Whereas Oonagh, for example, is coming through a science background and been in the department for a long time, and I've been in the department for not as long as Oonagh, but for a long time. And I came in from a nursing background, so I was an oncology nurse, cancer nurse by background, and I only joined genetic counselling when they first started discovering the cancer-causing genes. So our backgrounds are really different, and our profession is really emerging. And I think Amy and Rachel are the sort of the culmination of that. Really, they've sort of got the best of both worlds, and the ideal training to take this job forward to meet the challenges of the future, which, of course, there will be lots of challenges. As you said, Wajid, genetics is becoming like a really big part of all aspects of medicine, and so it is going to be a major part of medicine in the future.
And yeah, I think because with the Centre for Life, we know that there's a whole science city that's been built there in Newcastle. We've had there was a comment there from Malahad, and I think Alia was asking about what is the genetics that we're talking about today. And just briefly, we did mention it in the introduction, Alia, but it's about cancer genetics and identifying the cancer group, and being able to support families and identify potential risks in a family. But yeah, so coming back to what you're saying there, I think from your own experiences, coming from like different backgrounds, Oonagh coming from science background, Lorraine, yourself, all of that is developed into best practice, and I think that's where Amy and Rachel really benefit from all of that experience.
100%.
Absolutely.
And I think even on the scientist training program as well, a lot of people even then have very different backgrounds. So we've got some nurses, we've got people who've come from the teaching profession, we've got people who have studied sort of sciences. So it is very diverse, and I think the training program is really great in that you're able to work alongside lots of different genetic counsellors and try and get as much as you can from them, as well as from the actual teaching side of the program as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you say, the experience in the department, and you just get so much and learn so much from absolutely everyone. And other trainees, but also the more experienced genetic counsellors. There's always so much to learn, I think. And even in my couple of years I've been doing it, things are already changing. So I think it's important just to keep learning, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, as I say, we learn from each other. I think we really do learn from each other. I think that we'll never know everything, and so there's always something new to learn. And I think just how we talk to patients, we pick up things. Oh, that's a good thing to say. That sounds, that's a good way to frame things. So it is quite useful having new people around to help us, definitely.
And this all then benefits the people you work with, the patient at that end. And
absolutely.
ultimately, you're delivering and developing a service and you have to approach it tactfully, as I think Mullah has said, a complex situation and a delicate approach, and that's required. And so when somebody comes across your service, are they referred to your service, or is it something that you get detailed to, you contact them directly? How does it work for you?
It works in different ways. So a lot of people might go to their GP because they've got, say, a mum with breast cancer, or a sister with breast cancer, or a sister with bowel cancer, and they're worried for themselves. So the GP will make a referral to us. Other people may have developed cancer and they're worried about their children, and so they get referred to us. Other people sometimes do self-refer. They'll just kind of ring us up. We don't discourage it because we wouldn't turn them down, but it's always best to get one via the GP or another medical professional. But you know, there's different ways that they get referred, or they're in a clinic for something else and they mention the family history and they'll refer us in. So we've tried over the years to kind of make sure that our service is known to other services, so that patients don't go to the GP and say, I'm worried about my family history of breast cancer, and the GP says, oh, don't worry about it. We want everybody to be aware that we're here, so that if they're worried, they can come and see us and don't get fobbed off. But not that the GPs deliberately fob them up, but just don't get fobbed off, so that they know that they can come and see us. And if they're not at risk, we'll tell them. But the idea is, if you're worried, we can help you. We might tell you not to be worried in the future because you don't need to be, but our role is to kind of seek them out and help them out.
Fantastic, I love that. It's definitely a slogan there, Oonagh. Seek them out. Fantastic. And I think the other thing is that as this is expanding, where else is this kind of work going on apart from here in Newcastle?
We're a regional service, so we cover from sort of North Yorkshire up to Northumberland and across to Cumbria. So we cover about 3 million people, I guess. So the whole service is kind of centralised through our service, and we have a kind of another service in Teesside that kind of processes all our referrals and asks all the questions we need to get asked, and deals with it for the whole region. So we cover the whole of the region, and I guess around the country, similar kind of things exist all around the UK. Maybe mainly through genetic services, but in different forms and shapes and different things. But they're all doing it. Everywhere does it. It's probably a big percentage of most genetic services work in reality. It used to be about 50%. It's less than that now, and that's only because everything else has gone up rather than it's going down. So it's a big part of the services in genetics in general.
Yeah, just some of the comments coming in there in the sense of that science is constantly evolving, and you know, some of the older theories do get debunked and are replaced by newer theories or newer understandings of how things are done. Just there, you know, so the older ones kind of get moved on, and also comments about you know, that is chemo always the best way to be able to do this? We need alternatives to chemo is a killer. I'm not sure what your experience is, Alia. If you want to share any further than that, you're welcome to do so. But yeah, so does what you do affect how people get the treatments that are available?
So, well, this is something that's coming through in a new. Well, it's more and more. It's a new thing. It's mainstreaming genetic testing. So the things that we've sort of talked about so far are kind of like a traditional genetic services, cancer genetic services, where people who are like worried about their family history come through. But more and more now, people who are diagnosed with cancer have genetic testing. Some of that genetic testing will throw up that they've got this inherited susceptibility in their family, and that can be used to tailor treatments. So as an example, there's a type of drug called a PARP inhibitor drug. It doesn't really matter what the title is, but that can be used very effectively in women if they have ovarian cancer, and if that ovarian cancer is because of having a mutation or a gene change in a BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene, which is a type of gene that, you know, regulates cell control of our cells, and when it's not regulated properly, it can increase the chances of getting breast cancer and ovarian cancer in families. So it is being used to tailor treatment, but there's other genetic tests that wouldn't necessarily throw up whether or not you've got an inherited susceptibility, and that's doing sort of tumour testing, which can also tailor treatment for people, but it doesn't have the same impact on a family because it's just about that those acquired mutations in that tumour, which would make it clearer to the clinicians how to treat that tumour without it necessarily having an impact on the person's family. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if anybody wants to chip in with that.
And I think it's happening more and more. Not just in the sort of cancers. We tend to deal with mainly sort of bowel, breast, ovarian cancers out. So we know a lot about that. But I think out in the wider world, lots and lots of people's genetics and certain bits of stuff, their genetic profile is helping to change what treatment they get. And not just for cancer, for other things as well. So yeah, it's rapidly changing, really, and beyond our scope, I think, but it is rapidly changing.
Yeah, what you said there, Lorraine, it's really insightful. It was a bit science heavy for me. I was trying to stay with it, but it definitely made a lot of sense, in the sense of that you're able to, it's like the saying, using a sledgehammer to crack a nut kind of thing. It's working out exactly what's needed to use the right proportionate kind of approach to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're young enough to remember the movie. You're way too young to remember the movie Make It. But like when you're looking at genes, it's just all code. Just all code under there. But when you're doing this evaluation process and sort of doing it, you start to see patterns emerging. Obviously, like, oh, there's something here, and like from your experience, from things that you get put in front of you.
I think I don't know if you mean on the scientific level. I mean, we look at families and you see patterns emerging in families. You know what I mean? That's how a lot of what we do is we look at a family and say, is there a pattern here? That's kind of what we do. Is there a pattern of cancer here that we need to be worried about, or is there not a pattern of cancer here what we're worried about? And in the more in sort of intensive science, that's not something we would probably get involved with. We don't look at that. I mean, that's more of the kind of laboratory scientist kind of perspective. But certainly, we look at family histories. We look at people's families and say, "Oh, what's going on here? And is there something that could be going on? They might get identified through research because you think there's got to be something going on here." Or so we do look at patterns. A lot of what genetics is about recognizing patterns in families. That's what syndromes are essentially. They're just a pattern, So yeah.
And I think as well that we're really fortunate in that we work alongside quite closely with doctors and also the clinical scientists. So it really is sort of the clinical scientists that are sort of reading that code and telling us, if there's something in that gene that could be, involved in a person developing a cancer. So it's really helpful to work really closely alongside them and, sort of work with them in understanding what that means and how to relay that information back to the patient as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with Rachel there. I think I saw one of the comments talk about multidisciplinary teams or multidisciplinary working, and there's such a benefit for the patient ultimately if we can all work together and everyone uses their own area of expertise, really, because then everyone's on the same page, and it just means that we can give the patient the best up-to-date, most relevant information for them. And yeah, it's absolutely about working with the scientists and everyone else in the team to make sure we're doing so.
And I think we do work more, I think, with it. Yeah. We were kind of, I suppose, years ago, we used to do our bit and then send them on to somewhere else. We would do our assessment, talk to the patient, and then send them on to a screening program or whatever. Now there's a much more interaction between the surgeons or the gastroenterologists or screeners. We're all kind of understanding that we've all got a part to play, so that we do a lot more. We do a lot more education with the teams so that they understand what our needs are for their patients, and they understand it's like a two-way process really, so that we both understand what needs to be done to make sure we achieve the best for each patient. So there's much more of that now, I think, than there ever used to be. I think genetics used to be a bit of an ivory tower. I think that we thought we were all very clever and super scientific, but actually we're just just a part of the whole process.
Yeah, and I think, I think that's the beauty of our NHS, is that it is evolving as well, in the way that the needs of patients are evolving, the service is evolving. It is getting more patient-centric in that particular way, and it's necessary. It's a necessary requirement, and I think, as Malad is saying, an inclusive method of having that process. But I think it definitely helps you having those sort of conversations or having contact and engagement with other departments.
Yeah.
Definitely more knowledge and information, and sort of epitomizes the way that and the great thing that the NHS actually is for us here in the UK.
Yeah. We have to be one big team and behave like a team. That's the thing. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, there was a question brought up. Stillness was asking. I think it's more of a hypothetical sort of question, but I don't know if one of you want to take or all of you, however, sort of a response to it. So, in a twin study, can one twin get cancer and the other not get cancer if they are in that position?
I guess the answer is yes. Even identical twins, even if somebody is predisposed to a cancer. Cancer, in a very simplistic way, as we would say to the patient, cancer happens. It's a process that happens, through life, and sometimes you've got a predisposition, and you could be two identical twins having the same genes, but just you don't have the same environment, so you might have a highly likelihood of both getting the same cancer, but it doesn't always happen. And we can see that happening with people who know who've got a faulty gene that might mean they're going to get breast cancer. Not all of them do. The more identical you are, the more likely you'd have to follow the same process. But it doesn't always happen like that. So very much so. There's probably twins are more likely to get it the same than I would say siblings, but it's still not it's not a given. If your twin gets breast cancer, it doesn't mean to say you will too. Absolutely not.
That's really insightful, and I think just the way the conversation's going, because I appreciate we're getting information about this. Walaikum Assalam, Lord. Thank you for joining us this evening. When we're sort of looking at this, I think there's that, when we talked about your role as, being counsellors as much as it is collecting and managing that process, there's a sense of not being alarmist about it, not. I'm sure that the C word would cause a great deal of stress and all sorts of challenges for an individual. So I think there's how do you manage that process of ensuring that you keep it like that?
I think that's for me, sometimes that's one of the most rewarding bits of the job, because sometimes people come to see you and in their head they have a really high risk in their head of developing cancer because of their personal experiences or their personal worries about it. And when you actually analytically look at their family history, you can often be very reassuring to them about it. And in fact, the risk is much higher in their head than it actually is on paper. And once you talk through the processes with them and put it into context for them, it's really rewarding to see somebody leave your clinic with a smile on their face when they've come into the clinic looking very worried and distressed about it. And after, it's lovely when they go away saying, well, I feel much better about that. And we kind of tone down the worry, if you like, and be put it into context for people just by, looking at the family history. Not everybody, even if somebody has got a gene change that gives them a higher risk of developing cancer, not everybody with that high risk gene change will get cancer. So, we're talking about probabilities, not certainties. And I think I think it's hard for people to make that distinction unless they've had some form of genetic counselling. Naturally people just see what's around them and see their experiences and feel worried, understandably, because of that. And as genetic counsellors, we can use the science to actually reassure people in lots of instances.
I think the thing about that you mentioned, the C word, and I think that I certainly know that one thing that's certainly there is a more of a sea change, I guess, generally, that people are much more open about talking about it, and that's kind of happening over generations. If we talk to people, we get family histories, and people say whose grandmother had breast cancer, say, I don't know, 40 years ago, but they never really knew about it because nobody talked about it now. That doesn't really happen very often now. People are much more open. I mean, there's still a lot of people who don't want to talk about it, don't get me wrong, but people, I think the world has changed in the way that we think about these things now. And it's not a nice disease, but it's not the end of the world for everybody. And I think that people just, understanding more about what can be done and how we can help people means people, I guess, they're getting better at talking about it and coming forward. But not everybody does, but people are getting better. And as you say, if you frame it correctly to people and speak to them and explain things to them and help alleviate their worries, then it's going to be a step in the right direction.
I think it's also like the perfect example of how we use the science and those counselling skills together to reassure people, because you can use the science, look at the family history or that kind of a thing, marry that up with those counselling skills that we use, and that's a really big part of, I think, the essence of what we do as genetic counsellors is bringing those two together for the patient. So, yeah.
And I think we've learned over the years that people often have natural points of worry as well. So there's certain trigger points for people, and we often get people who come into us because they're, say, 39 and their mum got breast cancer at 40. So that's their trigger point is they're approaching that age when it happened to the mum, and they've never been worried about it until that point. And we've learned over the years, we know that we often think, we know why she's coming, but it's useful to have that kind of knowledge, because it helps. You know what the patient's worries are going to be, and you can identify them and you can help resolve those concerns for them. We can't make the world better, we can't take the risks away, but we can kind of at least understand why they might be worried about this at this particular time.
There's what I feel is a strong element, and like I said, with the way the NHS evolves and is continuously evolving, so, yes, it's that it will be quite stressful for those with high level of risk. And yeah, I think that would definitely be there. I think it's about doing the evaluation and just ensuring the quality of life is there, in the sense of, like you said, the difference between probability, the chance of it happening, compared to certainty, where it's definitely going to happen with just not knowing when, and really being able to give people that quality of life, and that is, just giving people that bit of ease of their mind.
I mean, there are no certainties. Well, there are very few certainties in life anyway, I think, but it's just, and that's the difference, a lot of our people are always going to live, well, we all live with a bit of uncertainty, but one of the biggest things with cancer families is that level of uncertainty that they have, and we have to kind of help them manage that. I think that's a big part of what we do, is to help them manage it, help them understand it, and make sure that they've got the processes in place that can help. I mean, we're about prevention as well, and that's kind of what we're here for. Is we're trying to prevent people from getting cancer, or we're trying to detect it early. And so the idea about that is you might get cancer, but actually what we're going to do is make sure that if you get cancer, we catch it early, we treat it early, and that we do the best. You've got the best chances that you're ever going to have. And that's kind of what we do as well. So we can't stop it happening completely, but at least we can try our best to make sure that we know when it does happen, that we can catch it as early as we can. And prevention is kind of a big thing in the NHS, really. I mean, it's the more we can prevent, the less we need to spend on treating it. That's an important thing, really, as well.
Yeah. And it reduces the pressure, it reduces the amount of resources required afterwards, irrespective of whichever place that might be. Prevention is always better than the cure itself. Going on to a more sort of personal note with all of you, it must be quite a rewarding job then, to be able to make such an impact in people's lives. How has this changed you or impacted you over the
It is a rewarding job. It does, and I don't know. It's something I wanted to do from being very young, so it hasn't changed me. I'm just doing I'm doing what I've always wanted to do. I think that's so it hasn't changed me. It's just very rewarding, I think. But it does make you I I think for us, you realise how lucky you are sometimes to be okay, and when you're not having to deal with what a lot of other people have to deal with. So you feel quite lucky. You feel lucky a lot of the time. But yeah, I just think we're just privileged to do it. Really, we're privileged to help people and enjoy that. We have to give bad news sometimes, and that's difficult, and that can be hard to deal with. And it can different families. It can be. Families can impact on you in different ways, but that's the tough stuff sometimes. That that you do have tough moments. That you don't. There's patients that you don't forget. I think that's the one thing. But it's part of what we do and what we're trained to do, and we have supervision and stuff like that to support us in that as well.
I just think it's a real privilege to be kind of part of somebody's sort of talking through a family history with somebody is a very intimate and personal thing to do, and I think it's such a privilege that people share things with you, and I just think it's like a very personal and valued part of people's lives, and they're sharing that with you, so it's such a privilege to do that, and that I find that really rewarding, and I love that is the main part of the job for me.
I think for me, it's so rewarding, to see someone through the process as well, and be able to talk to them just about their concerns and their life stories. But sometimes it's the small wins, the small take homes. Sometimes when you're explaining a genetic concept to someone, and you can see that it's clicked, and it's like an aha moment. And it's sometimes just those small wins when you think, wow, I've really I've helped someone understand this concept, and it might have been something that they hadn't got before. So I think it's the small wins as well as the big ones.
I just completely agree with everything that everyone else has said, and I just feel really privileged to do this job every day, really, that I do it. And it's sensitive and really personal stuff that you discuss with patients, and that they trust you and share that information with you is a real privilege. And you just want to do your best every day, really, don't you?
Yeah. Just one of the comments that Stillness brought in there, that NHS workers, there we go, healthcare professionals, that's what you said. Healthcare professionals should get paid more than footballers. I think that's
I wish.
yeah. Well, I think the reward and the input would sort of measure up, definitely, and I agree with that to a great extent as well. And also, just Strangers Paths, thank you for joining us. Peace be upon you too. So what sort of, because we're heading towards the last few minutes of our show, and it's been a really insightful conversation, and getting a really good insight and understanding of what you do, in the sense of, if somebody has concern, what would they do, and when they do get referred to yourself, what should people expect?
They would get, normally we do send out, most people get referred to us who are worried about cancer will get sent a questionnaire to fill in just about their family history, because we kind of need to know what their family history is, and they might not know, we ask for dates of birth, and but if you don't know it doesn't matter, just put in what you know. That's the kind of the most important thing. Then that'll get sent to our team, and they'll get the information they need to get. They might get called up to ask for a bit more information if they can. And then we'll have a look at it, and if we need to see them, we'll see them. If we think, no, actually we don't need to see this person, we can write them and explain things in a letter. We do that. So some people will get seen, some people won't, but they will always get an answer. That's the thing. They will always get a response from us. But we do try to get some information from them. That's probably the hardest bit for people. It's just gathering that information. It can be difficult as well, as Amy said before, just emotionally difficult to kind of have to think or have to ask relatives questions. If you can't get it, let us know, and we'll do what we can. But we need information in order to make assessments. I think is the main thing. So but yeah, that's what's to expect, and you'll get seen, and we'll work out what you need if you need anything, and support you if you need, and hopefully answer all your questions as best we can.
And just on from the patient's perspective, from the patient's family's perspective. I think there's also something in there about the fact that they contribute to that data by them filling in that information, passing that information on to yourself. You're able to like you said before, see the pattern. For whether those things. So there's a benefit actually that by participating, the patients are giving back something worthwhile.
Yeah, and it's to help. It's to not just help them; it's to help the wider family. I guess it's to help other. It's not just for that individual; it is for the whole family. And a lot of people, in the main, I think most people are probably either worried sometimes about themselves, but a lot of people are worried about their kids. And to be able to reassure people is helpful a lot, and make sure that something's happening for their kids. So the important thing is it's not this is about a lot of people do it because they're worried about their kids, and that's a good reason to do it, I guess.
But we try to support people in whatever their wishes are, don't we? So if people so some people don't want to know, and but they will still engage with us to help for other people or to help for their kids or whatever, and we just try and work with them in the most sensitive way possible to make sure that they're not nobody's steamrolled it over in this. Like, everybody's views are taken into consideration, and we will walk really sensitively around the family to make sure that those who want to know, and those who don't want to know are sort of allowed, protected, and allowed that space to have that freedom to not know if they wish not to know.
I think when you were talking about job satisfaction, that's one thing. When you feel you've done a good job, actually, is if somebody you tell somebody about what they can have and if they want to have a genetic test and they say no, and sometimes you feel good because they've been able to make their own decision. They don't feel that somebody else is making them do it. So actually, sometimes somebody not wanting something actually is a good result because that they've had an opportunity to think about it and decide because they've had the right information. So actually, I always say to people, my job's not here to make you have do something. It's to give you the information to allow you to decide what you want to do, not what somebody else wants you to do. That's the kind of most important thing.
Yeah, and also there's still the opportunity for those people who might not necessarily want genetic testing, but because they've still got some kind of risk associated with their family history, we could still refer them for additional screening without them having to engage with a genetic test if they don't want a genetic test.
It's all about what the patient wants and needs. Is the most important.
Okay. Just as we're sort of heading towards the last few minutes, I think stillness is sort of So just wanted to share that with you, and I think it echoes my sentiment as much as it does stillness, and hopefully our audience as well. It says thank you, Brother Wajid, for hosting such insightful live streams, and thank you to the lovely guests. May God, Allah bless you for the great work that you do. However,
thank you. Thank you.
That's lovely.
And it is, and I think, like I said, I'm blessed in my work to meet really interesting people and I'm really pleased we got to be here. And Strangers Path is saying, I'm glad to see you all. Thank you for everything. So
thank you.
You definitely help people understand what the service is about and the benefit that has. And I think, like I said, there's so much to the NHS. There's so much to look at and to get done. It's really, really comforting to know that in such a scenario where you are dealing with such a disease, the services are available in the most humane way possible to take care of you. So from myself, a deep thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I'll pass it over to you, ladies, if you want to give your last comments.
I just want to say thank you very much, Wajid, for hosting this, and it was a really happy coincidence that we met each other and that we were able to do this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and to speak to your audience.
Very well. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for having us this evening.
Thank you. It's been absolutely great to chat.
Well, again, Yeah. Thank you. I think, like I said, it gives insight to people and insight to communities. And so anybody who is listening, who is affected by these things, go back to your GP, go back to, if you are working with a specific nurse or a particular type of service, healthcare service, go back to them and you can get more information about this. And as Oonagh was just saying that, it is completely your choice onto the level of engagement that you have within this process. But whatever that engagement might be, it's your choice, and it's for the quality of your life as well, and as well as it is for protecting yourself and protecting those whom you love and those whom love you as well, dearly. So and on that note, we come to 6:59. I just want to say thank you very much to our guests, Lorraine, Rachel, and Amy. Thank you very much for your open and honest contributions. It's been an absolute delight. I've been your host, Wajid, and this is the E-Reminders. And this is it for this evening. And I'll see you all next Wednesday with the E-Reminder show then. Thank you all again, and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.